If we don't do this now, bad things could happen to the company.
Or how much of an inference do you think you really need to understand what you should do?
There's a reason why we have a process, because a large company is a machine, right? If a startup is just fireworks, a large company is the warehouse that's churning out the fireworks, and then it goes up, churning out the fireworks, and it's very methodical.
It's almost like an art form of how to get things done. And I wonder if bigger companies could then leverage the same mindset.
I miss those days of, listen, we all understand the problem. Fuck user research, I hate to say it, but there is a place at which this beautiful UX flow, it's not going to work, guys. We got to speed it up and get to the end.
How has design shaped you?
Ooh, that's a very meta question. How has design shaped me?
Hello and welcome again to the Shaping Design Podcast, where we help you get better at design through stories, strategies, and tactics. I'm your host, Mitchell Bernstein, and today we have again Blake Everingham, a very special guest, friend of the pod, returning to the pod to go over a couple of other things that I thought were really necessary for you to understand, something that took me quite a while to wrap my head around, but we went a lot over tools versus process, guerrilla research, really just figuring out what you need to know so that you have an instinct of what to make for the business or whatever you're designing. We also go over something that I think is one of the most important lessons that I have yet to implement, but since recording this episode, I have started implementing it, and I think it's actually vastly improved my skill set. So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. So without further ado, Blake Everingham. So I think it's interesting what you just brought up, and I'll let you reiterate in a minute, but basically people have they're very touchy about what they associate themselves with, because they want to like kind of radiate out who they are to everyone in a way that they're in control of it. And sometimes they're not, but it's just so interesting that when you brought that up, that you just like realize after the fact, oh, this hat, maybe represents something that I am not. I don't want to be associated with it, but it turns out it's fine, And I would actually ask you the question. So basically, before we just started recording, you said that you went out and bought a hat, and the hat, you didn't know really anything about the hat because you liked the logo on it, and then you looked it up afterwards, thinking, oh wait, what did I buy? And then you're like, oh, I like it. So what happened? What would have happened if you didn't like what you found after the fact of buying the hat?
I don't know, actually, because I've never been in a no. I mean, like, I've never been in a position where I bought something that's like, oh my God, I had no idea the messaging was this, compared to just, something innocuous or something, whatever. It kind of depends on what I were to look. If it was blatant and there was no, like you had talked about, like, hey, listen, Volkswagen, IBM, those are companies that through just the sheer nature of being associated, being in proximity of, something very terrible like World War II on that side, but, thousands of jobs, employees, they keep moving, you got to keep paying bills, and the company just slowly morphs into something that it's not that anymore. There's a little bit of a grain of salt, right? Like, well, we just got to keep moving forward. Like, I seriously doubt there are neo-Nazis walking around everywhere in these companies, like, you have to take it with a grain of salt. I think people are very reactionary, and I think I have become, even though I'm in my 40s and I can be disgruntled and be like, oh, it didn't used to be like this anymore. I mean, I think to a degree it's good to somewhat pay attention to the things that you're putting out there. That's a good thing. If there was a scenario where, like, this company, ended up, doing really atrocious things, I think it comes down to your own personal level of sensitivity, or how uncomfortable it's going to make you feel, and a lot of that is how you outwardly kind of express yourself, right? Like, it's put on, like, something else. I would probably be about as tolerant as you or anyone else, in a sense that it's like, this company, 70, 80 years ago did something, but now here we are, and A lot changes. 80 years is a long time for, the turnover of folks who work in a company. Are they still doing bad things or are they doing great things? I don't know. To me, it's like one thing we don't seem to do. We're very good at reacting, but we're not very good at digging in and actually reading the full story around something. So maybe there's that, but who knows, man? I don't know. At the end of the day, it's just a hat that I bought, and I looked them up. I was like, oh, this seems like a cool company. So luckily, it worked out. Luckily, it worked. That was a total non-answer, by the way. I don't know, man. I really don't. Everyone's super reactionary on X, formerly Twitter. Even social media has its own stories now. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think now people are more reactive on X because they're trying to make money, and the more clicks and views you get, the more ad revenue you can kind of draw in. So I think there's more of a spike in certain types of content and a reduction in other content. Also, the algorithms being changed. I've read recently that some people are doing tests where they're getting more performance on LinkedIn than they are on Twitter now for the same exact thing. And that's really
Mm,
interesting because the organic growth is more powerful now on LinkedIn, according to some of these folks, versus Twitter or X. So we'll see how Elon plays it out there. But I guess just to kind of wrap up that discussion, it all depends, and like you said, it depends on the person's sensitivity, how they feel, how they would react to it. In my opinion, I think a lot of people are overreacting and are oversensitive these days to everything. This could be because of a heightened introduction to sensitivity somehow, and there's obviously a trigger that is causing that. We don't have to get into that now, but it it seems evident to me that there are complaints about things that are not really something we should be complaining about, and the things that we should be more thankful for. Um, but then at the same time, there are companies that are promoting how good they are and are doing quite bad, right?
right.
Um, there's companies that lie; they put out fake data, and then we all suffer from that, not knowing the data that should have been released or has been hidden from us, and then we have to make decisions based on false data, which I think is really horrible. But anyways, uh, Blake, welcome again to the pod.
What's up, man? How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing all right. Some things better than others. Doing like more biohacking shit. I don't know if you're familiar with all that kind of stuff. Brian Johnson and Peter
I've read a
Attia
little
and
bit about it, but I've never dug below the surface of it.
yeah, I mean, many years ago we were sitting in the same office together, and you turned to me and you were like, like the secret to working out and getting big? And I was like, why are you telling me this? But then you told me and you said you have to take the weight and you have to lower it really slow. And you've like
Oh, I
just
remember this conversation. Holy cow, man. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
and I that like stuck out to me for so long. And so I didn't do anything with the information. I sort of had that in my mind when I was like working out here and there, but I was never serious about it. And now I'm like super serious about it because I did blood work recently,
Okay.
and my doctor didn't give me all the blood work that I wanted to get done, all the different measurements
Yeah.
and points. So I went to somebody else and I had them finish the rest of it. And there's things that are really good, and then there's things that are beyond horrible. And I'm like,
Oh,
"Oh my god, I didn't know how messed up my internals were." And I look great on the outside. I sometimes feel better than other days, right? Just like any other human would. But I feel like there's a level I have not unlocked. And now that I understand there's reasons why, I'm trying to fix those things. So, eating way healthier, cutting out all the seed oils, cutting out all the shitty food, and doing a lot more home cooking, working out a lot more,
mhm.
and cold plunging.
See, I haven't done that yet. And I was just going to say, congrats to you, man, for doing that because I've done that a little bit, but I'm very much like, and look, it sounds like we're on a fitness, podcast all of a sudden,
Yeah,
like
all
I
of a
know what I'm
sudden.
talking about. But
Full
it
disclosure.
always
Full disclosure. Neither one of us are health experts. Go
we
consult your doctor or
we
medical
are
physician.
we are two designers talking about fitness. So for the love of God, please do your own research. Yes,
Yeah.
please. It's interesting too, because, up until like 6, 7, 8 years ago, doing blood work and biohacking, whatever. I haven't heard that term, but just basically digging deeper into understanding how your body operates. That was never a thing. It at least not at a level where most people could do it. It was something where you have to pay a lot of money. So I never thought about it. But what's interesting, and this is not a knock at all. This is great, man. I mean, you definitely learn, and I should too. I did blood work maybe 2 or 3 years ago around because I was having like a lot of stomach issues.
Mhm.
And part of it was stress. It's just life, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that's great, both great and horrible to hear. Well, damn, then I got to dig into stress. That's a whole other thing. But then I also learned that I was just very overly sensitive to certain foods. And so you learn, right? Like,
Mhm.
in 50 years, had I never done that, yeah, and in another 50 years, if I had never done that test, I would have never known and probably just felt kind of poopy for the rest of my
Right.
life in certain times. Um, but what you said was interesting because I am the type of person that I try to do a lot of research, but then I fall back on what I know works. It's like the tried and true, and you kind of bake in a little bit into so eating healthy, duh, right? We all know how to eat healthy. Working out, right? Like if you were to work out for 6 months, you kind of know, and I think your father is very much into fitness, and you
Right.
have a little bit of a background where you can fall back on that, right? Um, but just working out in general, we've learned like that's good for you. So even though you said I'm doing some biohacking, the result of it is like, yeah, I'm eating healthier and I'm working out. And it's like, oh, the base level stuff is still stuff that you should like we go off into the stratosphere and it's like, listen, I need to eat 8 almonds, 12 ounces of water, and then I have to eat an apple in that order. And so, okay, all right, that's great. But just working out and eating healthy, that I think is like 60, 80% of just getting your body to a place where at least
Mhm.
you're not doing horrible things where you're gonna cut 5 years off the end of your life by eating junk food.
And I think right now it's hard to say how much you will really want those 5 years. You're probably like, God, this is 5 more years, whatever. I have 100 years in total, right? But
You're right.
then you get to the point, you're like, oh no, I want 5 more years. But just to expand on what I said about biohacking, honestly, working out and eating healthy is not really biohacking. In a way, it really is, but it's not considered it traditionally.
Okay.
So I also, try and do the supplementing and also playing with sleep, trying to get that fixed again. Just that got thrown off recently, but and trying to do other things that would increase mobility, strength, endurance, stability, everything.
Mhm.
So that's what I consider it all biohacking, and I know that you and I have a passion for creating something in that space. Um, I want to know, have you made any progress in that?
Yeah, some. So I kind of got my footing in my new role at Smart Red, and then I'm the type of person that I have to compartmentalize things. I have friends
Mhm.
that can jump from thing to thing very well throughout the day. Excuse me, and I can't do that. I'm just not. I'm not wired that way. It's kind of like work Blake, and then freelance, whatever you want to call like that fitness app, that mighty thing that I'm working on. That's
Freebird, Blake.
Freebird, right? That, and then there's family me, and then there's like I can't. So I was able to kind of come to a place where work has kind of it's like you learn your role, you settle in, you get the rhythms going, you feel comfortable. um and now I'm in a place where I've kind of like structured my, and this is me, right? Like I'm not saying this is the right way to do it, but for me, being able to like literally on my calendar carve out
Mhm.
2 hours of time where I close my door and I work on just that. It's like I always say, it's amazing how much you can get done in 2 hours if you turn off everything, including Slack, text, everything, shut your door. I mean, if my kids are screaming outside, I might peek out and be like, everyone okay? But shutting your door and working. So, sorry, long story short, yes, I have kind of, this was an 8, 9 year old. So, dusting it off and, starting to update it and also start pulling in, like things that we didn't have 8, 9 years ago, like or just new concepts. Like, what would I want to be able to do to hit one button, put my phone down, And then when I pick it up, I would love my phone to be literally like, hey, why are you looking at me? Fuck you. Go work out, right? Like, put it down. Like these kind of these interactions, I've started thinking about more. So taking the base level of just what I built, and then starting layering on kind of what I would want today, but also everything I've learned in the last 10 years of product design. So it's slow going, but it's fun. It's coming together. Offline, I'll definitely show you some stuff.
Love that. No, I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm happy for you. I can't wait to see what it looks like and how it works. Love it to be your first beta tester. But you're just doing like right now the visual design, right? Or
I
the
mean,
UX.
I am going through the process of UX. I am not acting like I'm a good product manager where I can sit down and write the ACs and the recs and everything. I'm not doing that. It's all in my head, but I am taking the necessary. Whereas 8, 9 years, it's funny too, because you see a project you did 10 years ago because you just know you love designing apps, but you have no understanding of UX. I had no understanding of UX. I think it was kind of baked into me because I've been doing digital for so long, right? That I kind of it's kind of like speaking a language, and you kind of halfway brokenly kind of talk, and you can get your point across. And now 8, 9 years or later, 10 years later, I'm returning to it with the full language. So now I can attack it from the perspective of user research, doing my own user research, doing user, all the things that because I jumped right into visual. I will always be a visual designer, so that's my comfort zone. But now I
So
attack it differently.
so explain to me your strategy for user research then
In general, or in terms of
on
this
on
fitness
on
app.
this project.
So there are 2 or 3 folks who and so my strategy is, who's my audience, obviously. And you could say the audience should be everybody. Well, it can't be everybody. You have to start with somebody. So it's guys like me who I know enough that I can do good things and get results, but I am not an expert. So I'm pulling in people that I know, friends who are at kind of my level, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, where they know enough, but push them a little bit more to have more impact when you are doing a workout. Um, and then and then just letting them go, right? So then what I do is I ask them, and this is very loose, right? Like, I could create like forms and send them to fill out, but I'll meet with them and I'll just ask them, what did you do? What did you write down? There's one guy that writes down everything. Scan, like, take a picture, send it to me. I want to see kind of how you think about how you write these things out. Did you take breaks? Did you walk away for 10? Like, I'll do that. I'll walk away for 10 minutes looking at my phone, which is the worst thing. I hate that. So, that's an interesting user challenge. How do you stop that? Can you block the phone entirely and with a screen that sarcastically tells you to put the phone down? I get all that feedback, but then I am my own user researcher as well. So I because I'm making it for myself, I'm constantly taking notes about, I really wish I could pick up my phone and do this, or I really wish I could look at my watch. I'm not wearing an Apple Watch right now, but wearing
I
an
forgot
Apple
mine.
Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Like, it's just a watch. Sorry, guys. Um, and what would I want to do to speed up the process of getting through a workout without literally having to look at anything? So in terms of user research, it's loose. I pull in feedback, and then once I get to a place where we could start testing something, then we'll take that next step. But it's not very formal. I'm making it a point for it to not be formal. Um,
I
it
love
just
that.
feels it just feels like the more formal I make it, the less fun it'll be. And right now, if I'm not having fun doing this, it's going to be a real drag, which is not a great business expression of the idea. I'm very serious about the idea, but if it gets very rigid and very hard, um, then it's not enjoyable. And if it's not enjoyable, well, then I might as well take this attitude that I have and put that energy towards something, if that makes sense.
When I joined the startup that I'm at now, I came from a bigger company, and then before that, an even bigger company, one of the biggest companies. And even at the second company, the process for understanding and like getting awareness, discovery was very slow, right? And it's kind of
Discovery of the software or your own
the
process?
discovery of like what you should do to
Oh,
fit the user's needs.
yeah.
And then I moved to the startup and I knew that it would be fast paced, but I didn't realize I was going from step 1 to 10 like like so fast
It's
that
harsh.
I
Yeah.
didn't even know how to count.
Hmm.
And it is harsh. It's a kind of like a got some skid marks on my butt, but it's like it's so much more fun when you're just like, all right, well, I have some direction. I can get a nice feeling about it. But it was so interesting going from a large company to a small company where the research was about more about the convincing of other people in the company to do something rather than actually finding the truth. And how much data or how much of an inference do you think you really need to understand intuitively what you should do?
Let's dig into kind of the evolution of, well, so I was going to say of a startup going from a small group as a designer or as a design culture or department into a large one. You went from large to small, I think is what I heard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I went from small to large. So it's kind of like the evolutionary track of that, I guess makes more sense. But to be honest with you, what I've learned is that there is no right or wrong. You just take what you learn and you plug it into what the hell they need, and then you learn more. And that's like the line is not linear. The line is just everywhere, and you just keep learning as you go, right? So when what I at site plan, what I learned for 10 and under a very rigid leadership, right, that requires the very best. I mean, in a small startup culture, if you're the only designer, you have to do everything.
Yeah.
And that's fine because people can kind of do everything, right? I know the argument where it's like, you don't want to be the jack of all trades. I agree with that. But guess what? If you're in a small startup and by and just so your audience understands, what that really means is you have, if you're working for a honest company that will allow you to have equity, options in the company, you are now invested in the company. So you have to drop the mantle of, I don't want to be the everyman. Let's have this beautiful design department where I have a UX right. I mean, UX right. Yeah, I'm really taking it to the extreme. UX writer, UX researcher. That won't exist. You just have to do everything because that's just the way the business is. But you learn a lot and you realize how quickly you can learn and become a better designer by getting in the fire and just doing the work, because if you don't do the work, then the company will fail. That's just, if you're in a team of 5 people. Okay, so I talked about that in the last podcast. I won't get into that. But when you transition to a larger, so it was basically me through, now me and others, that it be very clear, it wasn't just me. It was me for like 4 or 5 years. You were there, Roman was there. There were people kind of coming in and out, but I was like the anchor.
Mhm.
I did not know enough, and this is where I think I did a poor job. But my mentors later told me kind of, this is the approach that you should take, which is every they said every quarter. I would say every half year, every 6 months, you should sit down and literally write out the things that you're doing. And then next to them, write out what have you learned from them. And I don't mean like every little thing, but it's like, just by nature of being the only designer and not having a well-oiled machine in terms of feature development, I became the UX writer. What I learned was that I got really good at UX writing, right? Like at SmartRent, I'm known as the guy that says words are hard. I'm constantly reminding people, you have no idea how hard it is to write a sentence in software. But I got really good at it. Looking back, I would have then started formalizing like a process around, at this point in time, I will start the UX writing, right? Not before. It's all jammed together. I just kind of did everything and it just kind of worked out, right? You take all of your learning and you take it to the next, whatever your next career shift is, and you try to plug in what you can serve. And they're kind of two parts to be working in a large. You talked about working in a small company, a startup, right? I think your challenge is that a large company, and I'm jumping around a little bit, sorry, because there's a lot on this, right? In a large company, so you learn this. Now I am learning this. You've kind of gone through this which is you cannot go in with this fire to get everything done. People are going to be like, yo, you gotta stop. You're embarrassing yourself. Please. Right. Like we know you're a good designer, but there's a reason why we have a process, because a large company is a machine, right? If a startup is just fireworks, a large company is the warehouse that's churning out the fireworks, and then it goes up, churning out the fireworks, and it's very methodical. So you have to tailor your energy and your skill set to their processes. It sounds like you did you are smart as a whip. You can, and you're able to plug in and evolve and kind of change how you work to the large company. And I'm guessing, I'm assuming they had a feature process, a design lifecycle process that you would follow grudgingly, maybe to a degree.
What, at the big company or the small company?
At the big company.
I mean, I'll be honest. My team was responsible for actually defining that.
That's even better.
So
that's even better.
yeah.
But that's key, is that obviously it was needed. So you were the one that came up with it because you saw a need. Now you're taking that to a startup. I think your challenge, I'm totally guessing, I think your challenge is that you have now been exposed to what a large company needs. So imagine creating a machine in a box this big and it's working perfectly, right? At least, you have to oil it, you have to kind of keep things going. And then you take this big box and the company is not even as big as the box. So you have to take everything and shrink it down. And then you have to be able to pull it out entirely and say, this feature is needed tomorrow, this exercise is needed tomorrow or in 2 days. I cannot even use this box. So I think the advantage you have is that I did not have at SitePlan, like as a designer, I didn't have this like compartmentalized like structure that I can plug into and know that my version of how I work on it, how I design a feature will produce a very high level quality feature. You have your own version of that. But in a startup, you have to throw that out and then fall back on your instincts to design something great, right? That's really, really hard because, and this is where I don't know how much we are similar, but when I'm challenged with all that great stuff that we hired you for that you're great at, we don't care about it right now. Throw it away and design something quick. That feels like an attack as a designer. It's not. I mean, and obviously, if you look back on something, it's not. What you end up having to do is you have to take kind of a calculated approach and say, they're right. I cannot use this machine that I've created. I just have to dig in because I'm a good designer, a great designer. You're a great designer, and just design it, right? It's really, really hard to go back and forth between those, at least for me.
Yeah, I think that the one thing I'll add on to what you said, because I agree with all of it, is that I think one reason why we were the ones to define that process was
Mhm.
mostly because I was one of the very few people in the entire company who mastered the tool. And I
Mhm.
used the techniques that you taught me, exactly how you taught me it. I actually applied those and scaled them up. And
It's
so
fantastic.
so thank you. So those things were what I think helped lead us to then saying, okay, well, now that we know how to master the tool and we know how to wield it better than most other designers, which was Sketch,
Mhm.
then we know how to output a much higher quality and a much higher quality result faster. And we were able to optimize our process around that for the constraints that we had in that box, right? What would be then one of the more recent things based on what you said before? You said that you write something down and then you say what you learned from it. What is the most
Mhm.
recent thing that you learned?
So that's a really great question, because I have kind of taken on the mantle of design ops. So coming up with a design process, and I want to make sure, let's separate something.
Mm,
So, and this kind of touches upon what we were talking about on Slack too, which is like there are processes that I can create in a tool like a design system, right? Like you always use the design system. That's in the structure of Sketch or Figma, whatever. So, but then there's process around what do you do at any given time? Is there a discovery phase where I don't even understand which by the way, that's a problem that a lot of teams have, which is I was just handed this problem to design. I don't even understand the problem still. How can I design a solution? So there's discovery, there's iteration, there's a full design, where do those things happen? And you might use different tools along the way. So it's kind of like I'm at a macro level. I think what you touch upon is more of if you take one sliver and you input the tool like Sketch, then there are micro processes. I don't know. There are
Well,
steps. Yeah,
okay. Well, let me actually interject it real quick. You're
sure.
talking about creating a monolith of a process that's cookie cutter enough for anyone to follow at a big company because there's a lot of other constraints at play. My
Hmm.
question though with that though is I'm able to do that without all the steps. I go from step 1 to 10. I figure out what we need, right? Just reading a couple of feedback that the user would send us or that we just discussed as a problem where we realize they're not clicking the right thing and they're doing
Hmm.
something different, like very much like one of the problems that we solved at SitePlan, and I'll get into that in a second. But
Sure.
uh, there is no I need to convince my other two founders about uh the A/B testing of it or this or that. It's like we're right now in a phase of we're figuring out what is working, what's not, guessing as to how to make it better, and then designing a mock-up of is this good enough to build so that we know what we're actually going to build, and then the next day it's literally done.
Wow.
So,
Gotcha.
it's amazing. I've
It's
never worked at a
fantastic.
company where I put something on in Figma, and even before I finish in Figma, it's already built in development in prod.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, um, we'll see how that works out. But that's my process right now. I'm actually the one with tar on my feet. I'm actually slowing down the company because I can't move pixels fast enough so that the developer can code it. Like he can code it faster than I can move it in pixels, which is insane. So that's why it's a little different from my situation. Where your situation's again, like I said before, it's a lot of it's about persuasion because you want to make sure you're doing the right thing and not moving
Yes.
everyone in the wrong direction all of a sudden. Because it's a giant cruise ship. If you're spinning it on a dime, you're gonna throw people off the boat, right?
So the question is, but this is a really important question.
Okay.
Is it a you problem or is it a them problem? And what I mean by that is I would dig into, and this is where it's like, I'm the guy in the room that asks, can you pose the question differently? Right. Which is, do you think that the challenge you have is truly because you need to work faster? And by the way, I mean, me, I worked in a culture where I couldn't have worked any faster, right? And you can get
Yeah, yeah,
great results that way,
yeah.
right? Or is the question, I could put 180% of myself into this work faster and the quality could go down, but at least the one amazing engineer I'm keeping up with him, her.
Him.
Is the problem that, or is it we should take a step back and actually, and this is hard to do in a startup because it's all about build, 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 build. So listen, at the end of the day, the answer is you need to keep up with them, right? But just for a second, do you think that slowing down to your pace, which is probably super damn fast, would allow everybody to consider the problem a little bit more? Like what end of the spectrum do you think that challenge is?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot of dichotomy to that question because it's very contextual. Um, the the users we're trying to solve for, we kind of have an understanding of who they are, but we don't have built out personas like we did at SitePlan, right? Where they were on the wall, they had a picture and a story
Yeah.
behind them and whatever. We don't have that. well, we don't have like a formal research process where we ingest the research and then we send it off to somebody to analyze, and then they create a table of statistics, and then we all go over it in the presentation. We don't have that either.
Mhm.
We literally are talking to somebody, trying to get them to use the product, seeing what would help them use the product, and figuring out, is that something that other people need too? If
Right.
that is something that other people need, we build it. There is no question about it, right?
There's something beautiful about that, though.
It's gorgeous. I love this process because it's, first of all, it's fun, and every
Yeah.
day I'm building something new. Literally every day, I'm building a new feature every single day, and that's something that I like. Usually, it's like a week or 2 or 3 or 4 for just like one thing. Sometimes it's like 6 months, but this is literally a new thing every day, and every feature could be its own company. That's how big these things are.
You sound like me 8 years ago at SiteGround. I mean, that not like you that's and I remember it's a roller coaster, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm sorry, were you gonna say anything else on that?
Yeah,
Because
I was just gonna say that the it's almost like an art form of how to get things done,
yeah,
and I wonder if bigger companies could then leverage the same mindset, because if it's just about convincing people, then fire the people that are not easy to convince, that are not like, not easy to convince, but like, that are not able to just get on board and move, and they have to slow everyone else down just because they're not trying to keep up, and you're trying to convince them to keep up. Whereas all three of us, because there's only three of us in this startup, we're literally every single day talking about the thing that we're building, what needs to be improved. Mitchell, you missed this 500 things, and then it's already built.
yeah,
Go check it and make sure it's working and there's no bugs. And then I'm going to show you that they actually talk to the user, so they're going to go present this to a user like the next day. So we're getting constant feedback in this feedback cycle, and it's hard. But to answer your original question, I do think that I need to work faster and worry less about the pixels, but still maintain that balance of high quality work and getting things done, which is the ultimate, problem every designer faces. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's all I'll say about that.
Getting to what you just said. So I'm gonna change. I'm gonna take back my answer and say forget asking a question differently. It's you're just in a startup right now, man, and you just literally have to work as fast as you can.
But
That's the
why?
reality
But
of it.
why do, maybe you know the answer to this? Why do large companies not have the same mindset?
Okay, so this is theory, right? I could be wrong. One is survival, right? A big company doesn't have a survival mentality. A big company employs hundreds, if not thousands, of people, including quite a few in your own department. There is no fire under anyone's butt to have that energy, right? Like you literally just told me that you go in every day and you are quickly solving problems. You're designing. I can't even keep up with this one amazing engineer. That to me is a beautiful problem. I miss those days of listen. We all understand the problem. Fuck user research. Fuck, I hate to say it, but there is a place at which this beautiful UX flow, it's not going to work, guys. We got to speed it up and get to the end. So you're there right now, right? In a big company, you are allowed to ask those questions, right? Like, you can't do user research on every single feature, but you could do on some big ones. The problem is the pressure, right? Like there is such a thing as pressure to get work done in a company large or small. Usually in a small company, it's because if we don't do rapid work fast, the company will fail. We have to meet customer demands. That's an easy one. That's easy, right? Like it's my own survival at stake. I want to eat. I want to be a great designer, so I get to design things. It's just I'm at warp speed designing things. So it's kind of like, well, you have that squared away. In a big company, you kind of slip into the company, and the only now you can have a really like whether they're positive or negative, whatever the personality is, you could have a manager like I tend to push people because I want to see great work coming out of them, right? So I'll go into critique and I'll push people, right? But there could be managers that are brutal on employees because they're just that's just their personality. That's a form of pressure, but that's kind of artificial. Well, it's all artificial. It's business, but like that's something coming from one person. But if the culture of the company is high, and I'll use Apple as an example because I can't. It's cliche, but I can't think of anyone else, and I've never worked there. I have to assume that even after they were a huge company and Steve Jobs came back, if you have a leader emphasizing quality and I don't know about speed, but quality. Listen, just keeping software and hardware at a high level is really hard to do. So there's pressure to do that. A lot of companies, large companies, there's no there is no inert pressure except you maybe putting it on yourself. So to me, the answer is actually kind of easy, which is the bigger a company is, the more the water spreads out, right? So it's like in a startup, you're just in this deep tank and you can't look at the bottom, you just have to keep working. In a large company, you're just standing in this pool and we're all just kind of mulling around doing stuff, but I know I can rely on 100 other people that they're gonna, it's kind of like the ship. I'm not powering the ship. The ship is moving. I can just kind of move along with it. So I think it's by nature of outside pressures that force you to do a lot of work, or it comes from yourself. But a large company is definitely not one that is just a natural form of high paced pressure to work, unless it's coming from a the only form of pressure that I have seen work in a company is a top level leader that just requires excellence. That's what seems to put the right amount of pressure on people to work at a high pace.
It sounds like pressure is so if there's physics around businesses and improving quality of work and pushing out products, pressure is required from top down in order to get either working. At a smaller company, there is smaller volume, so the pressure is greater. And at larger companies, the pressure is felt less because the volume is greater. That it just you don't feel it as immediate. But if you have someone that is really pressuring you, then yeah, you're gonna have that same kind of output. But it seems like that's kind of like the physics behind it. Would you agree with that?
I think you summed it up perfectly. I
Okay.
really do. I think that's right. Yeah, and I don't think pressure is a bad thing. To be honest with you, the very best work I did was under huge time constraints, where and now there. I think I said in the last podcast there is a line in the sand where too much pressure is just bad for your mental health. But I have met quite a few folks over the years where they have only experienced a culture, even in great design led larger companies, where the attitude is less about I need to do the very best work I can to I'm doing great work and there's not a lot of pressure. I'm just delivering. And then they'll go to another company and then another company. And they never really and what I'm saying doesn't mean it's true. It's just what I have seen is that I think there's something to be like I am so happy that you are in a company that is rapid firing the way they are because man we want to talk about a career defining life experience as a designer working in a very high pressure cooker. Like you can't do it your entire career, right? Like I did it for I'm no one special, but I did it for I think the pressure was there about 6 7 years. And then the larger the company got, the more kind of spread out. Even in that leadership style, you felt it a little less. But man, there was a core 3 4 years where most of the lessons that I have taken to Smart Rent, if I can help in any way, was because I was in that pressure cooker to do great work. And I've expressed that to designers that have never that would excel, that are better designers than I think I'll ever be, but they haven't had that moment in time where somebody is like, if we don't do this now, bad things could happen to the company. And I think that allows, once you've been through that, now I'm just waxing philosophy as a designer though, but once you've been through that, like I'm sure that you coming out of the larger company experience of creating like your processes and things, like now if somebody were asked you to do it, you'd be like, sure, no problem. Other designers would be like, oh my God, I can't take this on. In a small company, once you've been through that ringer, right? That and it's hard, it's really hard, but once you've been through it, then it's kind of like, dude, you can go anywhere and you've already seen how much pressure you could put on yourself. So then it
Mhm.
all feels less um, life threatening, right, to your career. Like, I'm not going to be able to do it. So I
Ok-
think there's something to be said for going through what you're going through.
So let's shift gears a little bit because I want to talk about specifically something that has to do with this, and it's the mindset going into it, right? When you're the only designer, it's you don't really even worry about mindset. You're just getting shit done. You're in that survival mode. There's no time to
Yeah.
think about mindset. But you also mentioned to me that there's a different perspective of a mindset from a leadership kind of view. So, can you touch on that as to what you meant by that and how that is different than, I guess, the other levels of the mindset that need to be required to strengthen that mental fortitude that is needed to really just get things done at a scale that you might have not worked in before?
From a leadership perspective,
Yeah, because
in terms of design,
we were
yeah.
talking about before that there's like we talk often a lot about like lower level designers or
Mhm.
freelancers, and I say lower level not like skill wise, but like in the hierarchy of a company. The difficulty is navigating politics of shitty clients, of just kind of being looked at as like a zoo animal in some cases. Some things that my other co-host Logan is talking with me about, and how that kind of changes based on the size of the company. And um, it's interesting because I wouldn't be considered necessarily a leader at a company, but I did lead projects. But I think that you would be more considered a leader at a company in the design realm, and wondering what do you need to strengthen your mindset to take on that challenge of that role.
Gotcha. Yeah, I understand now. That's a great question. So I mean, I am 43 and I feel like I'm just now gaining the confidence that I can provide what a designer and IC needs to push them to a place where they're doing their best work, right? Um, so when site so I'm trying to answer the question, but it takes me to kind of run through the last couple of years. So real quick, and then we'll land on kind of the leadership and what I think it takes. I had always been an IC, right? So I spent 10 years in branding, 10 years, 7, 8 years as a product designer, kind of doing everything, right? I had high level insecurity, low level confidence. I was able, again, like I, I don't want to sound arrogant. I somehow churned out good enough work to keep surviving and keep going. To your point, what you just said is totally true, which is when you're in the, and pressure cooker is not the right term. It sounds super negative. I loved my experience as site plan, but in that pressure cooker, you don't think about the ways in which you are failing or succeeding as a designer. You're just going, 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 and you'll just wait for a leader to tell you if you fucked up or if it's amazing. Even though it's kind of like positive feedback's great, but how is it helping the company? Anyway, so I spent that long doing that, not even thinking about it. And I think most designers have a level of insecurity that forces or pushes them to keep trying to solve a problem until it's the very best solution you can come up with. I spent a number of years just feeling extremely insecure as a product designer. Like I had no user experience, research feedback, anything like that. I'm just churning it out and having no idea if anything is good. Then you get to a certain place, some longer than others, took me a long time to get here, where you look back and you see all the great work you did, not really biased, but just kind of like, I should have seen that then. But you take that experience, and then when Site Plan sold and I was moved into a manager position, I had the same insecurities again. It's like, I don't know how to lead people. My God. And who am I to lead a team of designers if I feel insecure that I would literally talk to friends. They're like, dude, you just spent 9 years, like they just sold. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? But it's your own insecurity. And I think most designers, I think the best designers are the ones that have a little bit of insecurity around the quality of their work. And I don't mean they're not confident. It's just, I got to try a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. And I will somehow get there. But boy, it's hard. Once I got to a management position, I dove in. Step one is just dive in and do it. Just dive in and do it, no matter how scared you are. And I get trepidations about everything. But what I learned really quickly was that every single time, remember I touched upon how like I started doing design ops kind of building. I had no idea that I was doing design ops building. I would just step in and I would see great things and then like this needs to get fixed. And then I would just come up with a solution that helps the entire team, process, whatever, because of all the experience I had before. I knew what worked well. I knew what didn't work well. It's like you don't want to live in Jira all day long, but you got to have a little bit there to keep everybody kind of consistent and moving, right? You learn the balances about things. That's just experience, right? I don't know how designers move into manager positions so quickly without that much experience and excel at it. That's amazing to me. So coming out the other end, there's just one key thing that I think two things that separates what I consider to be a great leader that I try to emulate. One is confidence, right? Which is really difficult for me to exude because I feel like I'm constantly learning. But I'm very confident that I've had so much experience under my belt that I can offer ways to push through these problems. But if you walk into a meeting and you're like, I don't know, man, we're gonna figure it out together, then your designer is just gonna be like, well, why? I'll just go and figure it out myself if you don't know what you're doing either. So there's a level of expertise and confidence that you can provide and say, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna try this. I'll tell them the war stories around like, hey, I went in this direction and it failed miserably. And let me tell you why. But it allowed me to gain confidence, right? The other piece that I think for me is critical to be a great design leader, right? And this is where it's like I think a great design leader can push designers like this, underneath you, your designers to become better designers. That's confidence, that's critiquing, that's knowing when to push them, some, and then encouraging them to go outside their boundaries, right? But then you have to push up to the political realm of like, like I had this huge push for accessibility in Smart Rent. And we have an amazing designer who does accessibility. She's like an expert at accessibility. And so you have to navigate those waters. But the experience that I had as a designer working direct. So let me ask you a question, Mitch. Do you work directly with the executive level? Assuming you do.
Executive level is just the co-founder, so it's us three people. So yeah, it's us.
Bingo. Bingo. One thing I learned, like with Joseph, is that I just thought I was just it's just Joseph. We're gonna get in
Yeah.
the room. He has always been the president of the. Looking back, it's like he has always had the same attitude, which is president of the company. He's executive level, and you have to sell him. You have to sell ideas to executive level, and you have to get comfortable with that. When you're in a big company, the ladder feels like it's all the way up here.
Mhm.
So what I always tell designers is, let's get this in front of this person. I'll carve out 15 minutes and be an ambassador to them because there is a level of discomfort that even though this is just a human being and they have their own set of problems navigating a business, they're not approachable. And you have to have the confidence to tell your designers, I have been through the ringer. I did 10 years working directly with the president of the company. And guess what? It's really not any different. They just have a very vocal opinion and you have to learn how to navigate. So being an ambassador for your designers based on your experience, where you can bring them to the table and allow them to present, all you're doing is saying, I did this. What I'm telling you to do, I did this and it worked. Use my experience and I will help you. It's kind of like I'll hold your hand the first couple times. Next time, if you have an idea and it's strong enough, I'm going to set up a meeting and I'm going to take a step back and you do it. Right. So I think that guidance as an experienced designer, kind of like you're always in the trenches with them, but you know how to get up there based on your experience. I think that's totally key. So experience and confidence, to boil it down, has helped me um, do whatever it is I've done so far in a leadership position.
I like that. I like that a lot. And to add on to that, you know, you've been a mentor to me post site plan and during site plan, and using a lot of those lessons, I was able to apply those to helping to create different products that didn't exist, to lead teams of up to 200 people, and so forth, so forth, so forth. Now I'm back to square one, where I am the team creating the design and trying to go back to the drawing boards. Like, all right, well, what was it that really worked? So it's nice to hear that how you're outlining it, because although I'm not at that stage yet because we don't have anyone else, it's just us three. It's basically the PM, the engineer, and me, the designer. But we're working on that all together. There is no ego in our relationship because there
That's
can't be.
awesome.
It's just there's no room for ego. Even if we had it, it's gone. Um, and there's not the more and Wiz are the nicest people alive. I highly recommend you reach out and just talk. Then I can introduce you. They're great people. Um, but the, you know, having that need to then be the springboard for other designers is something that I would really love to engage in the future. That's something that you're currently doing and helping to kind of give them the opportunities. It seems like that's like a key element. Like leaders give opportunities. They help elevate everyone else. They don't like to just sit on top of other people and push them down.
Yeah, I think you summed it up. I have had two types of managers. Ones that tell me what to do, and see, I'm such a great worker bee that I could spend my entire career just doing what I'm being told. Right? It's just you can't spend your entire life doing that. Or the other type of leader that I try to be are the ones that push me to do work that they then can use as a way to express the level of work that this designer is doing. It's like I want to go like literally I've had managers say, "Listen, that idea you had last week, you know, and by the way, listen to ideas that designers have, right? Because hopefully we have a ton of ideas, most ideas suck, but if you get them all out there, there are going to be a few real winners, right? And if you have a manager that's like, would you give me those, right? And then work on them a little bit. Like last two sprints ago, I had a designer who had an amazing idea. I was like, this is awesome, and it was an idea how to improve our our design process, right? And I said, tell me more. Well, I don't have anything more. Figure it out. Tell me more. And this is where it's like, I always tell people, like, I never like telling people what to do because you guys are self-sufficient. Like, really, I'll give you, suggestions. But it was like, this is the one time where I'm like, carve out 2 hours, figure it out. I will defend those 2 hours if anyone, asks, which, like 2 hours, it's fine. And they developed this idea. And I said, we're going to take this to the executive team because I want this to happen. And I did it for two reasons. One is I really like seeing the look on a designer's face when they're challenged, but then the reward is they're being acknowledged, right? Because that is what keeps the designer happy, and happy designers keep producing great work, whether you're under pressure or not. But the other thing is, it is literally a great idea. Like, I'm selfish, right? Like, if I'm designing kind of the processes and things and somebody has an idea, I'll full on tell them, I want that idea and I want to implement it. So, but you own it. I'm not going to take your idea. So the ability to be an ambassador to designers, to allow them to gain the confidence that, like, you have that confidence. You have done enough where you own processes and programs and all of these things you've done, and and you said it, you'll probably at a certain point you'll want to express that to your designers, like, hey guys, let's take an idea, push on the idea, produce something, and if it floats, let's pitch it to the executive level. Like, you were probably the type of the type of personality that wants others to succeed as well. By the way, one really quick thing, that this is something that I did not do at SitePlan that I really wish I could have.
Sure.
So I'm going to give this to you. Joseph always told me early on, you own design. I'm looking to you to build whatever it is we need to build I don't mean features, I just mean the design department, right? Even though you're one person, I will not defend, I will push out these ideas around how we operate as a design department. Product, it was product and design.
Mhm.
You own it. I never ever considered that a true statement. Looking back, I failed in terms of moving into a leadership position early. I chose, kind of probably subconsciously, to remain in IC. And, at one point he even said, like, I gave you a lot of opportunities and you want to remain kind of focused on the design. And that's okay. Looking back, I would have done things differently. Every, 3, 6 months, I would have evaluated what works really well. Dude, if you're a team of one, then what you're saying is you are a department of one. You own all the processes and programs and everything. Those are cold terms, but like all the things that produce a great end result. At SitePlan, I just worked. And somehow it worked out, but I never ever took a step back every 3 months or so and made a list of things like, Joseph, we should do it this way. We should hire this because I can't do it well. I never did that. So my recommendation for any designer who's ambitious, in a startup and you're one person, two things. One is, always remember that you are not just looked on as a designer. You are design. You are design in the company, meaning you have the blessing to own how the department is going to be as a culture. And then two is, every 3 to 6 months, write down things that don't work well, and then pitch ideas on how to solve it. Right? Like, hey, we should have a design critique every 2 weeks, whether there's something to show or not, where we get together and we push hard on any idea, whatever that is. And if you have a great team, they'll say, okay, I trust you. So you go from an IC position to more of it. I mean, you're an IC, but you are pitching great ideas that can formulate the structures in which you can own the type of department you work in, and you literally will evolve to a place where you're just running a department. And so I highly recommend you taking time out to always consider what's working well, what's not, and then figure out how to fix those things. Because I didn't. I wish I had.
That's great advice. And I am, just for the record, I am taking notes of things that I've been working on. But now I should go back and actually add, okay, what's the result for me? Not just for the company, but for me. What did I learn from those things? So that's definitely an addition I'm going to add to that. I'm going to try to figure out how to organize it a lot better, because now I'm like more interested in this. And also it helps understand progress, right? If you're able to look back every 3, 6 months, you're going to have, after a year or two, a lot of things that you can look back and like, oh wow, actually I did learn a lot of stuff. Oh, actually I am a different person than I was 2 years ago. All right, so last question, for now. Definitely want to have you back always. You are right now. You're tied with Logan for number of episodes appearing in on the pod.
Yeah.
So you got to beat him. He's my co-host now, so you got to beat him now. Got to come on more
All
than
right.
him.
Got it.
But the question I want to ask you that I didn't ask you last time,
Yeah.
and this is something we started doing more episodes into the podcast. You and I talked this entire episode of how we are shaping the design world and using design to shape things around us.
Mhm.
How has design shaped you?
Ooh, that's a very meta question. How has design shaped me? Um, huh, I think design has allowed me to see that quality really matters a lot in your life. That everything some of this is cliche, obviously, but like everything we touch is designed. So you always want to take a step back and think about, you know, the quality, the design of something that you're going to use, even like a mug, right? Like you just have a different way of looking at your day-to-day experience. And and also there's an acceptance that great design costs a little extra, right? Because like we literally sell our services as designers. So there's an acceptance that, you know, high quality should have a cost to it because we know that it's funding those designers to continue doing work. So I generally look at my life and well, not my life, but you know, like my day to day in terms of, you know, if I'm going to use something over and over and over and over, I am not just going to go to Walmart and buy something and it'll break apart, right? So I think there's an awareness of quality and things I try to gravitate towards. I try to look at or I try to use things that were made with some kind of amount of love, right? Like, you know, this came from a mom and pop, and they put a lot of effort into it, and you kind of start seeing life in terms of like, you know, there are a lot of people making things and I want to support that. So it opens your eyes a little bit to that. In terms of my um in in terms of my life, and I guess to a degree my career, and this is something that I kind of it's strange to say this, but it's true that in the last couple of months, having evaluated my entire career and where I'm at now, um, I am very comfortable saying or stating that I'm not the type of person that just goes into a factory, checks in, does some stuff, checks out. Like there are some designers that do that. I know for a fact that if I'm going to spend 8 hours every weekday of my life toiling away at something, I need to have a passion for it, which is really selfish. Um, I need to really care about what I'm doing. And I need this. It's really arrogant. But I need to work in an environment. I don't mean company, you know, I'm using a very loose term. I need to work amongst people that really care about what we're building. And I've learned that about myself. You know, I'm sure if you've worked with folks that just, you could tell they just kind of don't care, like they're there and they'll agree to your thing. That is like a major psychotic annoyance that I have, right? Like if I'm not in a room with people that are going to be engaged on what I'm talking about with the same level of passion, um, then I don't really want to talk to them. Not be like I can grab a beer with them after work. This isn't a human condition thing. This is just a if I care about this as much, if I care about this with a certain level of energy and passion, my expectation is that you should as well because we're literally working on the same thing. And if you don't, then shouldn't you kind of question like why you're doing this thing? Because I think the passion that we have to design great things leads to great things. So I become like, even from the last time we spoke on the last podcast, I have kind of solidified my belief that, you know, I want to spend the rest of my career in some capacity, environment, group of people, company, whatever it is, my own idea, working with people that show up and just want to, like you, like I want to be surrounded by designers that care so much that they're willing to just work, iterate until we're at the end. And I think because so now taking this to your question, how has design affected your life? I think my design has affected my life in that if we're really care about design is just the nature in which we build something beautiful and high quality. If we're the ones building those things, then you might as well go all in and accept the fact that you really care a lot about the pixel being left or right, whatever. Like, I want that same passion to the guy, the girl, whoever, to the left, to the right of me. I want that energy in a room. And to your point, like where you're at right now, there's something so freaking beautiful about 3 people all there, not because the meeting was on the calendar. That's kind of another big business thing. It's like, well, there's another meeting. It's like, well, yeah, I put a meeting on your calendar because let's get together and tackle this problem that we should all care about. You are right now in a beautiful position where you are working with people that I think all care as much as you do, and they look at it from different lenses. So the way in which design has affected me is that I care a lot about what I'm designing, and I think it carries out into my professional life. I just love really beautiful things, and I want to build beautiful things, and I want to be surrounded by people like you that also care at a very high level. So I think that answers the question, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, and I really appreciate you coming on the pod.
You got it, man. It's been fun.
We'll do it again.
I hope so. I got to clean up my office, but one day when I'm not working, I will. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thank you.